Enjoy all your favorite sports like never before at BetMGM. Sign up using code Hawkeye and receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. When you register with BetMGM, you'll get instant access to a variety of parlay selection features, live betting options, and the best daily promotions in the business. And with BetMGM at your fingertips, every play and every game matters more than ever. Remember to use code Hawkeye and receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. Place your money line, prop, or parlay bets with the king of sportsbooks today. BetMGM and GameSense remind you to play responsibly. BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. Iowa only. New customer offer. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. Please gamble responsibly. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-BETS-OFF.
You have one unheard message.
Hi, I was calling Current, the influencer marketing platform, but I think I just got redirected to a bunch of people listening to a podcast. Well, anyways, I was calling Current because I was told they could help get my brand set up on TikTok Shop, and even build out an affiliate program of content creators promoting my brand, and even have those content creators go on live streams and promote my product there. Wow, I could really use Current. I also heard that the brands they work with are making millions in sales. I guess I'll just go to their website at current.tech.
Hashtag no music, no intro. Ryan and I heard the request in terms of everyone wanted a Star Wars themed podcast, especially when all the news at Disney Investors Day of the multiple series that are going to be hitting Disney Plus soon. And we have a commitment to our fans that if we're going to do a Star Wars podcast, it had to be done right. We couldn't just get anyone on it. Ryan and I can just talk about Star Wars for an hour, but that's boring. No one wants to hear that. So we wanted someone that is tied to the Star Wars universe. And so I don't know how it happened, but here we are. We were able to get Hal Hickel of Industrial Light and Magic on the podcast. He's currently worked on The Mandalorian. Don't know if he's attached to the Book of Boba Fett yet. He's been connected to the Star Wars universe since pretty much sounds like the prequels in episode 1. He's worked at Pixar. He's the animation director of The Mandalorian. He's worked on Toy Story. I could go on, Hal. Like, I love this. Like, we will continue to throw out the accolades because you deserve them. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, but I'm a little concerned after all that build up, and then you go Hal Hickel, and people are like,
"Who?
Wait, what? Who?" hopefully, if they stick with it, they'll get something they like out of this. So I hope so.
I think our conversation is going to be exactly what they want. And I'll start in terms of people are going to be like, how did you guys even get Hal to come on the show? And to me, and I'm going to do a segue. It's about shooting your shot in life. Like, you have to take chances. You have to shoot your shot. So all I did, here I am, just a guy on Twitter. I've been following Hal for a couple of months now. When I realized he was the animation director of The Mandalorian, I was like, what? Huh? Oh, that's an instant follow. And I just said, I got to find a way to get Hal on the show. And Hal was like, what's your podcast about? And here we are. I want to segue into you writing a letter to, I don't know exactly who you wrote it to, that your ideas of the sequel to episode 4, and your ideas getting rejected. And is the story true that you had that letter, that rejection letter, like you had that in your office in terms of, like, is it motivation? Like, that story, I love that story. It's just, okay. I love it.
Yeah, that's a shooting your shot, although that one didn't pay off at the time. But I'll follow it up with another one, though, that did. But I'll tell that story first because you asked. So Star Wars comes out in 1977. I'm 13 years old. I'm already making little Super 8 films. So I was already interested in film and stop motion, like Ray Harryhausen kind of stuff. And Star Wars comes out and blows my mind and gets me interested in all different areas of visual effects. And so, a few months after it comes out, or I don't know, later that year, whenever they announced in the media that they were going to make a sequel, I'm like, well, I've got an idea for a sequel. 13-year-old me living in a farm in Colorado, cattle ranch in Colorado. So I dash off a letter, and I guess I sent it to, somehow or other, I found the address for Lucasfilm, and their office at that time was in LA. And I sent it there, and I had, it was an impassioned, a 13-year-old's impassioned plea to please include me in some fashion in this next film. I'll do anything. And here's my big idea for the film, which was, some terrible, hokey, but wonderful 13-year-old's idea of what the film should be. And
so your idea wasn't better than Empire Strikes Back.
Close. It was really close, I think, probably, but no, it was terrible. It was terrible. And but so I got a nice letter back, typed up, and at the time it was a little a little bit of a letdown, because it was kind, but it said the sort of things that now I understand, like that they hadn't read my story idea, but they had people working on it. Now, of course, now I know that entities like that don't take outside submissions and read them, because they then get sued by all kinds of people saying that they ripped off their story. So it's to protect themselves. I didn't get that at the time, but anyway. So, but they also wrote that getting into Hollywood takes a combination of talent and luck, and I think it said and an agent, and so I held on to the letter just because I certainly wasn't gonna, even though I was a little let down, I wasn't gonna toss it. But then as the years passed, I started to realize how cool it was. For one thing, it was on this awesome Ralph McQuarrie designed letterhead, and Ralph McQuarrie designed a lot of the look of the original Star Wars films.
Wow.
And then as well, it was typed up and signed by Bunny Alsop. And Bunny Alsop was Gary Kurtz's secretary. And Gary Kurtz was the producer of Star Wars. And later as I got some perspective, I was kind of like, what on earth was the secretary of the producer of the film doing, answering random fan mail? Because they must have been getting truckloads of this mail, right, by this point. And so, that just made me kind of love the letter, even as the years went on. And then, years later, I was actually working at ILM, working on Phantom Menace, and we had a big breakfast to celebrate the wrap of the project. We'd finished it, and George was there. And so one thing, somebody would never do during production, obviously, while we're all just working and making the movie, would be to ask George for an autograph or anything like that. That's just not done. But at the breakfast, it seemed kind of okay. And so people kind of started sheepishly coming up with posters and things and asking George to sign them in a little line for him. And he was super gracious, and he's sitting at a table signing them. And so Rob Coleman, who was my supervisor at the time, Rob was the animation director on all three of the prequels. And I was an animator, and so he was my boss. And he had seen the letter, because I had it framed behind my desk at ILM, because by that time it was such a prized possession of mine. And he goes, go get the letter and show it to George. I'm like, no. He's like, no, go get it. So I went to my office and took it out of the frame and brought it back to George. And he looked at it, and he kind of chuckled, and he underlined talent and luck and wrote, you have it, and signed his name. So it was like a big,
Awesome.
closing of the circle. Now, but your original question was about taking your shot. So that was a case where taking that particular shot didn't lead me to ILM. I mean, It was part of my path to get there, but it didn't result in me getting there. But years later, I was doing stop motion animation at a studio in Portland, Oregon, called Will Vinton Studios, which is now Leica, right? They did Kubo and the Two Strings and
love Kubo,
Fox Trolls and Paranorman. But back then, the big deal was this is the late 80s, early 90s, was the California Raisins, which were this crazy sort of cultural blip on the radar.
Yes.
Yeah. So we were doing clay animation, we were doing that stuff. But I still had my eye on one day, hopefully, landing at ILM. And the guy that owned the company, along with some other folks in Portland, had created a creative conference that was brand new. It was their first year having it. And one of the guests that was going to come and speak at this conference was Dennis Muren. And if you don't know who Dennis Muren is, he's he's been a visual effects supervisor at ILM since it began in '75, and he's won more Oscars than any living person. He's got, I think, 8 of them. for visual effects. And he's just a wonderful guy. And at that point in time, for me, he was one of the pantheon of visual effects gods. You had Ray Harryhausen, you had Dennis and some other folks, Phil Tippett and a few others. And so I told my boss, I'm like, you got to introduce me to Dennis. You've got to introduce me to him. And he's like, yeah, sure, no problem. So he did, and I chatted Dennis up, and at the end of the conference, there was a big party for attendees and speakers both. And I, of course, found Dennis in the crowd. And so this was part 2 of me taking my shot. I was chatting up Dennis, and he mentioned that he had wanted to get a tour of that studio that I worked for in Portland, because Dennis himself had started out doing stop motion. And he said, but Will was, their schedules didn't line up and it didn't look like it was going to work out. And I stuck my hand up and I was like, I'll give you a tour. No problem. So he and his wife and his son came to Will Vinton's the next day. It was a Sunday. And I gave him the tour and the spiel and everything. And he was great. He urged me to keep in touch with him, and he became kind of a mentor for me and an encourager for the next several years between that point in time, which was around probably 1990 and 1996, when I eventually ended up working at ILM. So that was me taking my shot in that moment and just, going for it. And that did help me get there, because Dennis was very encouraging. He was a great mentor, and he really steered me in the right direction and kept telling me, come on down and work here. And when I felt like I was finally ready, I did. And he was great. So anyways, so there's that. And our time is up. No.
No, we're just getting started.
You've been the animation supervisor or director for so many, major films, quality films like Iron Man, the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, Super 8, one of my favorites, Pacific Rim, like just great visual movies that really like the visual, the animation is a part of the greatness of those movies. So, but what is, like, it's one of those terms that just kind of scrolls by, on the after credits. What is an animation supervisor? Like, what does that entail?
Yeah, sure. So every studio is a little different, but this generally holds true across most of the big visual effects studios. So you've got a project that comes in. So I work at Industrial Light and Mag. So we've got some project that comes in, because we don't just do, as you just mentioned, we don't just do Lucasfilm Star Wars projects. We do projects for any studio that comes in. So something like Pacific Rim comes in. On a project, there'll always be a visual effects supervisor. And that's on our, within ILM, that's the creative leadership for the project. And then there'll also always be a visual effects producer, who is, of course, is involved with budget and schedule and all that, and deals with the studio, of course, on those issues. But then if a project has a lot of animation, meaning creatures, dinosaurs, robots, or even machines like Transformers, but even like helicopters, planes, tanks, vehicles that for some reason need to be CG, then there'll be someone like me on the project, an animation supervisor. So at its broadest, I'd say our focus is on things that move. But I would say more often than not, that involves performance of some kind. Again, a creature or a monster or an animal or, that kind of thing, or a bunch of them. And then at ILM, at least, those three, the visual effects supervisor, the animation supervisor, and the visual effects producer form the leadership for the show. And we have our teams that we supervise. And so in my case, I'm supervising the animators. I mean, I also weigh in on modeling and texturing and all those things when we're talking about things that we are then going to animate. Because, it might be that they're modeling the creature and I might get concerned that, well, the legs look a little short for some of the action that we have planned for it. So let's talk about that and that sort of thing. But the main focus of my attention comes once the sequences have been shot and edited and turned over to us, and the director has said, okay, the dinosaur goes into this shot and it's chasing these people here who are pretending to run from something that's not there. But I needed to get over here where this car explodes, 30 frames later, because the car is supposed to explode because the dinosaur stepped on it or whatever, right? So we get a turnover like that. And my job is to cast shots with the animators. I'll know that certain animators are good with certain things and not so good with others. So I'm casting shots to animators, giving them groups of shots. Then I give them feedback. I present the work to the director when I think it's ready, and I receive the director's feedback. And that's basically the job. The other part of the job that's less obvious, I'd say, is getting to know directors, because it's one of my favorite parts of the job, honestly, is when I'm working for a director I've never worked with before. Certainly in early meetings, doing a lot of listening, trying to pick up what their vision is for the project, but also hanging out with them on set as much as I'm able to, and again, not talking a lot. I try to listen a lot more than I talk, so I can get a feel for what makes them laugh, what makes them angry, how they communicate with their creative partners. Like when the DP comes over and they have a quick discussion about something, I'm always trying to, not in a creepy way, but kind of hover around those conversations. And conversations with actors are gold. Those are more tricky though, because sometimes those can be quite sensitive, and so you have to understand that. But it's a great part of the job, and so the job is just to figure out what the director needs and figure out the best way to get it done in terms of these creatures and things. And it's a lot of fun because it sometimes straddles acting choices. It's not always just about action and explosions and stuff. Some of these creatures really need to have sort of acting moments, and that's a fun kind of place to be. And even better is sometimes when we're actually working with an actor on the creature. So Bill Nighy in the second and third Davy Jones films, or Alan Tudyk in Rogue One playing K2SO. Those are really fun too, because you're kind of partnering with an actor. So anyways, that's kind of a messy description of what I do.
No, it's a great description, and it puts things a lot, for layman people, just regular people like us. It makes sense. What led you down that path of becoming an animation director? Because obviously, being a director, you've worked your way up the line in terms of you are managing and over, supervising animators, kind of like your direct reports. But like, what put you on that path, and when you realize like this is something that I want to do, it's something that I'm good at, to get where you are right now?
Yeah, I mean, my story is pretty similar to a lot of visual effects folks, which is to say there was some movie that clicked with me at an early age. And in my case, it actually was well before Star Wars. I saw the original King Kong on TV as a rerun when I was maybe 6 or 7, living in Southern California. I saw it on TV, and I was so angry at the treatment that Kong received that my mother helped me write a letter of protest, which we sent to the local TV station, who I held responsible for this because I didn't really understand how everything worked then. And I don't even know if she mailed it, but she helped me write it, and she assured me she mailed it. But I also I started getting fascinated with how they do that. And fortunately, because this was obviously the pre-internet era, there were 2 really good books at the time, right at that point in time. There's one was called Making of King Kong. The other one was called The Girl in the Hairy Paw. And they were big, coffee table, but they were sort of large format books with lots of pictures and descriptions of how stop motion worked, and the fact that it was a little 18-inch puppet and all this kind of thing. So that really just fired my imagination. Of course, I discovered Ray Harryhausen films, and my brother and I were already very keen on, like the classic Universal horror films of, Frankenstein and the Mummy and Dracula and Werewolf. And so it kind of dovetailed with that interest. And I was also I became a huge Godzilla fan, even though that was a guy in a rubber suit, not stop motion. I still just dug the heck out of it. I was a massive Godzilla fan. So that all sort of was going around in my brain. And I got, a few years later, a teacher that I had gifted me a Super 8 camera that they weren't using, and I started making stop motion films. And then Star Wars came out. And like I said, it kind of it broadened my interest from just stop motion to, how did they do Luke's lightsaber? How did they do his land speeder? How did they do the spaceship shots? How did they do those, like Obi-Wan turning off the tractor beam over this seemingly infinite chasm inside the Death Star? All that stuff. And I got my hands on a magazine. Again, this is pre-internet, and it's even pre-Cinefex, but there was a really excellent. The first really good behind the scenes article I ever read, like in a magazine about a movie, was a big double issue that Cinefantastique, this magazine that was around then, did on Star Wars and Close Encounter, because they both came out the same summer, which is kind of mind blowing.
Wow, that's insane.
Yeah, and so they did this big double issue just on the visual effects. And one of the things that was cool about it is they interviewed a lot of people on the crew, and one of the people they interviewed was this guy Adam Beckett. And Adam Beckett had been in charge of all the animated effects on Star Wars. So, for instance, something that really caught my eye was when the Jawas zap R2-D2 and all those little blue electrical arcs crawl all over him. That really caught my eye. And he talked about that. And he also mentioned that he had gone to the California Institute of the Arts. So that, I was like, all right, well, then I'm going to go there. And so it kind of set, that's really more than anything what set me on my path. And I was very lucky. I did get accepted. I didn't end up staying because as much as I loved it, and I really loved it there, I was terrified of the tuition, the mounting cost, and which is something I think a lot of people can identify with now as well.
Yeah.
And this was, 82, and Reagan was not doing us any favors. And like almost all my tuition was being paid for with loans because my folks didn't have the money to just pay for it outright. And I certainly didn't.
You preach to the choir right now, Hal.
Yeah, exactly. So I left after the first year and spent the next almost 10 years worrying over that decision, although it eventually did end up working out. But I went back up to Portland and I worked at one little shop doing kind of sort of low budget local advertising, but the techniques we were using were stuff I was interested in at the time, this kind of motion graphics effects work, even though it was like sort of crappy local advertising, but I was learning and it was a job. And then I had a buddy that was working across town at this place I'd mentioned earlier, Will Vitton's, and the California Raisins thing was blowing up and they were hiring. And he's like, you used to do stop motion. Come on, you'll love it. We're doing national ads. You'll get paid better, whatever. So I applied there and got hired. And that's when things started to finally kind of click. I was finally starting to get a decent paycheck, and I was working on stuff that had, a bigger audience, even those TV commercials, and we did a few half-hour specials as well. But that's when I really started thinking, okay, I can leverage this towards a career at ILM. I just got to keep working here a little, build up a good demo reel of stop motion animation shop. And I had a few other skills that I thought could be useful at ILM that I developed by then. And then Jurassic Park came out. And I thought, oh, I'm screwed. They're not going to do this stuff with puppets anymore and stop motion. They're going to do it with computer graphics. And I don't know anything about computer graphics. So I guess I'm stuck up here doing mud puppets for the rest of my life. That's what we call them, mud puppets. And this is turning into a really long answer. But this I do want to mention one thing in this. So the next thing that happened to me is something I'll be eternally grateful for, because it is in fact not something where I took a shot. This was dumb luck, although, as they say, luck. What is it? Something about luck meeting luck preparation.
Favors. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I like to think at least I prepared myself for this moment. But basically, what I didn't understand at the time was that companies like Industrial Light and Magic, who had just done Jurassic Park, and Pixar, who's doing Toy Story, they didn't have a worldwide network of great animation schools churning out super talented CG animators back then, right? So they were having to they needed animators. They were having to draw them from traditional animation, like people who had done cell animation or people who had done stop motion animation like me. But I didn't realize that was going on. I figured it was a bunch of people in lab coats, with computer science degrees doing this stuff. And Pixar was way behind on Toy Story, and they needed more animators. And there was a guy there at the time named Mike Belzer, and Mike had come from the stop motion community in the Bay Area, but he was now working at Pixar. So he started putting out feelers to people he knew in the stop motion world. And one of them was one of our very talented directing animators at Vitton's, Teresa Drilling. And she had no interest in moving into CG, but she knew that I was trying to figure out how to make that leap and get, take the next step. Yeah. So she said, hey, you should send down a tape. Apparently they don't care if you even know how to turn on a computer, as long as you know how to animate characters. That's what they prize, So I sent down a reel that, I could never get hired with there now, but at the time they were apparently desperate. And that was it. That was like the super lucky thing, and I guess I just had enough decent character animation on my reel that it got me in the door. And the thing is, I actually ended up loving it, you know, because I knew other stop motion folks who tried it because, you know, it was the next big thing and it was a gig and all that, but they kind of hated it and they ended up going back to stop motion. But I really dug it. I liked it. So that was massive for me. Anyway, so then I worked on Toy Story, and then Toy Story ended, and then, you know, it was announced that Lucasfilm would be making more Star Wars films, and that ILM was ramping up on the sequel to Jurassic Park, the film that I thought would kill my career. And I was like, oh, I got to send it reel over now. Now's the time. And Dennis was still, Murin, who I mentioned earlier, was still encouraging me. And so I finally sent my tape to ILM now that I had like Toy Story shots on it. And that got me in the door. And here I am. All these years later.
You said something that I was going to ask you, and so I'm going to ask you it now. And it's just regards to the transition in regards to technology and everything, and how has that transition in terms of, you know, I don't want to assume that being like working in animation is almost like a young person game, but like you have to obviously know your shit, right? Like excuse the French, but you have to know how to do things. And so how has that transition, or I mean, right now you're a director, but how was that transition for you from stop animation to potentially like CGI and things like that as technology became better and improved over the years?
Yeah, I think for me I was very lucky, and I'll explain mine in a second. But for a lot of people, it was really hard. Like the transition from what we now call practical effects or photo optical effects or analog effects to the digital world, which happened very, very quickly. Now, it wasn't quite the overnight thing that it seems like now, like if Jurassic Park happened and suddenly everything was digital, but very nearly. But, you know, had been a slow ramp up where, in the mid 80s, there was a film called Young Sherlock Holmes that had a stained glass night that was CG. And then there was The Abyss with the water tentacle.
Yeah.
And there was a bunch of effects work in T2 that was groundbreaking. And there were other examples. Those are just ILM examples, but there were other examples. You know, Tron, Last Starfighter, et cetera. But Jurassic Park comes along, and that was really the tipping point, right? And I visited ILM. So, you know, I had met Dennis, and he'd said, you know, if you're ever down in the area, give me a shout, I'll give you a tour. And so a couple of years after I'd met him in Portland, I was on my way to Santa Barbara for a friend's wedding, and I called Dennis ahead of time and said, hey, I'm going to pass through. Would you mind if I stop in? And he's like, sure. And it was right when they were making Jurassic Park. And so he gave me the tour, and that was my first look at, you know, Willy Wonka's factory. Like that was my interest. I was like, the whole day, I was like, I don't think my feet were touching the ground. You know, I was just vibrating the whole time. And, but when I was there, a lot of the old school visual effects equipment, because I was a complete nerd about visual effects, you have to understand, from even before Star Wars, but certainly after Star Wars, and especially for ILM. So I understood from reading articles and, you know, anything I could get my hands on. I had a pretty good outsider's grasp of the various specialized optical printers and different things they had there. And it was all there, right? And he took me around, I got to see it, and like, oh my God, well, there's that thing, and there's that thing I've read about. And, oh, that's amazing. That was around 92. And when I came back to work at ILM as an employee 4.5 years later, all that stuff was gone. It was all desks with computers on them, which is a pretty quick transition if you think about it. And that means that there were probably a lot of people there that either had to figure out how to make themselves valuable in the new world, or retire or move on or do something else. And that had to be super wrenching. And I missed all that, right? I was still at Vinton's as all that was happening. But what was lucky for me, and I was talking about this earlier, where there were stop motion folks who you know, came to Pixar to work, or other companies doing CG animation, and eventually just went back to stop motion because that's what they love. They love that process. I wasn't that married to process. I was a lot more interested in what ends up on screen. So I was excited about this new future and this new technology of computer animation. And that's why for me, the transition was great. Like it was an exciting, positive time in my life. I mean, I had to learn new things, but I was really into it and happy to be doing it. I felt super lucky. Whereas, I knew some other folks who were like, oh my God, this future is so bleak. I remember one stop motion animator, it might've been Anthony Scott. He said that, or Tim Hiddle was one of these guys that was, really fantastic stop motion animator. And they said, animating in the computer is like animating with boxing gloves on. And these are people who are very into the fact that they're using their hands to tactilely do the animation, right? To touch the puppet and move it. And so for them to say, it feels like animating with boxing gloves on, I was like, oh, that's so sad. But for my case, I loved it. And there were also some things that part of my job at Vinton's, I was a character animator, but also I ran, because it was something that was interesting to me. I sort of made it my business to run a lot of the motion control gear there. And motion control it's sort of like those robots you see in car factories, except instead of a welder at the end of it or a drill or something, it's a camera. And back in those days, it was even less slick than that. It was sort of like a carriage on a track with a tower and an arm with a pan and tilt head. But it's all motorized, and it's run by a little PC computer running this software that was super arcane and specific. And while I didn't know anything about computers, I did know how to run that particular program, and I knew how to do motion control photography. When I got into character animation at Pixar, animating characters, I realized that just the way the software worked and the way the process worked was very similar to programming one of these motion control rigs to do a specific move. Because you'd drive the carriage down to the end of the track, you'd raise the boom up, you'd set the pan and tilt until the camera is looking exactly where you want it, and you lock all those values into the computer, and then you'd say, okay, 2 seconds later in the shot, I want the camera at the other end of the track, down low, tilted up, pan to the left, and you set all those values. And connecting those two positions were what we call splines, these sort of curves that describe the movement of, for instance, how many degrees of pan there were over that number of frames, or how many degrees of tilt. And that all made sense to me. So then when I was animating a character, I realized, oh, this is the same thing. I mean, the character is the motion control rig. I move the wrist up, 6 inches higher in space and extend the arm out 8 inches and rotate the hand around such and set all those values in the computer. Anyways, that's a bit boring, but it was another sort of stroke of luck for me, because I as I sat down very nervously on my first day at Pixar to start animating, I was like, oh wait, I kind of get how this works. Quite randomly, I have this experience in my background that actually serves me in this moment. So that was helpful. I had a dream. Well, I had a dream though. The day I packed the moving truck in Portland, and the next morning I was going to begin my drive down to the Bay Area to start my job at Pixar. That night I had a dream that I walked into Pixar, and they're like, "Oh, great, you're here! Awesome, come with us!" And they take me to this room, and there's a table in the middle of the room, and the walls are lined with, like metro shelves or wire racks or whatever, with bins full of, like, one of them has motherboards, and one of them has computer screens, and one of them has power supplies. And they're like, great, assemble your computer and we'll be back in just a few minutes. And I'm like, oh, I think there's been a mistake. And they like close the doors. It was like this super intense stress dream. Fortunately, that's not what actually happened when I got there.
Oh, thank goodness. And I've worked in IT for 15 years, and it seems more daunting than it actually is. I mean, it's hard work, but it's like once you get in it, it's like, oh, okay, like I got this. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so, absolutely.
But you talked earlier about using your animation and how you have to integrate actual acting into your animation. So we have to fast forward to my little man, I think, Grogu.
Yeah. Yep.
Or also known as Baby Yoda. Who's captured the hearts of everybody. I mean, literally, I know you can't really go into season 2 of Mandalorian, but like literally, I just sat down with my wife. She hadn't seen the finale of Mandalorian season 2 yet.
Yeah.
She was in there just dripping tears. I mean, this little thing has captured the hearts of America, and it's just amazing because it's not real. But it had me crying too. It's insane.
It's not even captured the hearts of America. Like, it's captured hearts of people who are not even connected or like Star Wars. Like,
right? Exactly. So how? Like, hell? How do you do that? Like, how do you do that?
Well, it's funny because when season 1 was gearing up, I wasn't on it right from the very, very beginning. But then I had just finished a project, and so I just got a call from at ILM from one of the producers saying, "Hey, we're getting this season 1 started on this Mandalorian show. You're aware of it?" I'm like, yeah, I've been hearing about it, and I'd worked with Jon Favreau on Iron Man.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, John was asking that, if you could maybe like sit in on some meetings and stuff, because we've got this little character and, we're still in the design phase, but we just kind of want to get your thoughts on it. So that's how it started. It wasn't necessarily like, this is your next project, you're going to do this, which is often how it starts. But in this case, it didn't. And I was like, oh, yeah, sure. Happy to. I love John. I'm happy to pitch in. So we had, I was in a few meetings about it and I was giving my thoughts about this and that. And and then I was in more meetings, and then I was in more meetings, and then it was like, oh, by the way, you're doing this now. You're going to be the. So I was like, oh, okay, and but it was great. And John and I, as I said, we clicked already because we'd had a really good experience together on Iron Man, and we got along great. And so there was a lot of thought going into this little character, but just the nature of production generally, and especially I think with TV stuff. Although this is my first experience with an episodic thing, but there's a lot of rushing as you approach the beginning of shooting, right? And we were trying to get this little character sorted out. And so what that meant though is that once they had artwork from Doug Chang runs the Lucasfilm art department, and once Doug's group had artwork that was really kind of in the zone, like, okay, we think this is it, but it's still just 2D artwork. Then maybe they'd done some maquettes, some little sculpts maquettes, but really then it went to Legacy Effects. And Legacy Effects is the company that built the puppet version of Baby Yoda. And Legacy Effects at one time was called Stan Winston Studios, and Stan is one of the giants of practical makeup, animatronic,
right.
of the dinosaurs from Jurassic Park, etc. And then Stan passed, sadly, and the company's now called Legacy Effects, but it's his legacy. It's really what that's means. And so they began work on the puppet version because they had, it's like, well, first day of shooting is here. We need this much time. We got to get to work on it. So in parallel, we were building the CG version of him because we knew that in some case, we didn't know what the breakdown was going to be. You kind of never know at the beginning, but how much of it's going to be the puppet, how much of it's going to be computer generated. But we knew we'd need both. So we started work on ours, and we were trying to, make sure ours looked like theirs, and et cetera. And so then shooting started, and there was a period of time of everyone kind of finding out how this was working, right? Because on some shows you can build a practical version of something, and it just kind of end up not working that well, and you end up replacing it all with CG or most of it. On other shows, the animatronic or the practical version works great, and you do very little digital stuff. Maybe you're just painting out rods or puppeteers or something like that. So you never know. And so we're going into this, and John's very eager to use the puppet as much as possible, but he just wants to make sure we put the best foot forward on our first few shots. So we launch right into animating the very first time you see him, that moment when his little hand pulls the blanket down and you see his little face in there. And it was shot with a puppet, but because it was a very important moment and we wanted to be able to kind of iterate on it, really like tweak it and change it and try different things and all that, we ended up going CG with that shot just so we could experiment basically with it. And we learned a lot. And while we were learning on that shot, they were also continuing to shoot first unit with the puppet and learning what the puppet really did well, which is a lot of things, as it turned out. In fact, the puppet really, now looking back on it, the puppet does the heavy lifting for the character. And anything we did in CG was really an effort to just extend the capabilities a little bit, but not so much that anyone ever went, oh, wait, that feels different from what I was just seeing. Like, hopefully people don't know what technique they're looking at.
No.
Nope, not at all.
Oh, good. But John, and so we did like on season 1, we ended up doing a few key moments again because it was early in the process and we wanted to be able to kind of fuss and experiment with it. So one was those first few shots. Another moment is the first time the baby uses the Force on the Mudhorn. His little hands extended, and his eyes are closed. So that was CG. And then some other things like when he's walking, for instance, when he and Grogu are walking into town in episode 4, where they're going to meet Cara Dune for the first time on Sorgan, and or when he's eating frogs, things like that. Things that are kind of hard for the puppet to do. And
so the classic, Baby Yoda sipping coffee. So that was CG.
But with that one was the puppet. They make a good ring. So when he's like sipping his little broth bowl or whatever it is, that was the puppet. And so most of the time it's the puppet. But John did something very smart, and because here's what quite often happens on a movie set where you've got some kind of puppet character, but some of the time it's going to be CG, and you've planned some action that the character's supposed to do. It's supposed to walk from here to there and climb into its chair and pick up a prop or something. And you get there on the day, and for whatever reason, let's say it's difficult for the puppet to do. An approach that often happens because you've got all this crew standing around waiting to shoot and it's expensive, is to go, okay, well, yank the puppet out and we'll shoot a clean plate and we'll do it in post. John was like, no, let's not do that. Let's find out something the puppet can do. Let's rework the blocking here and figure out something that is good for the puppet. And I think that has been the main key to making him like really work, because we all recognized that the puppet was working. He looked great on film. People loved him, even in person. The minute they pick him up, they're doing that little bounce thing that you do when you pick up.
Yeah,
exactly. Like it was like automatic. And so he was very canny about that. And he was like, this is really working. So let's cut with the grain. Let's find ways to show off the puppet instead of trying to make it do things it can't do or whatever.
Oh, love that.
And so we did a fair amount of work in CG on season 1, again, just because, we were figuring out where we're at. And we did less CG work, but still some on season 2, because I think everyone was figuring out what the puppet was good at. The puppeteers were getting better and better and better. And they're, the legacy puppeteers are amazing. And the directors were all sort of figuring out like how to get the best out of the puppet. So it's really great. It's been super fun. And, we continue to pepper in our CG Baby Yoda shots, hopefully, without anyone noticing here and there. And he's good fun. But it was fun to help. It was fun to be in the mix in figuring that out. And John and I had a lot of conversations about, like Mando never treats baby Grogu as a cute baby.
Right.
A little bit in season 2. There's a few little places now that they've bonded where you might hear Mando laugh or something, which is like weird. Like, whoa, did he just laugh? but it's usually a little bit more of a tough relationship. And so we talked about films that had that kind of thing in it, like Paper Moon, which is one of my favorite films, and Ryan and Tatum O'Neal are in that. And he doesn't treat her like the cute, adorable little girl that she is. They have an almost adversarial connection, which Mando and Baby, it's not adversarial, but he doesn't coo over him. He just kind of like, get in your seat and, don't touch that. And, that kind of thing. And so we talked a lot about that. And then there were some other things too. Like I initially thought that the baby's eyes should have more sclera, the white of the eye, so that when you look to one side or the other, in conventional cartoon character design terms, it's one of the things we call appeal, like something that just makes it look so cute and lovable. And John was like, no, I mean, a little bit's okay. And there is a little. If you look in some shots, you'll see when he really looks to one side or the other, you see a little bit. But he's like, I kind of like the eyes big and dark so that he's a little more like one of those weird little animals that are cute, but also a little unsettling and weird. So like a tarsier or a bush baby or something. There's different, those little, from Madagascar, those little fuzzy animals with like huge eyes.
Yes. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And so he kind of wanted that feeling, again, more than a conventionally cute thing. And John loves the idea that this thing will eat any disgusting thing that's in front of it. Which is, again, it's sort of counterintuitive, but it really works. It really works.
So we're on talking about The Mandalorian. Being that we know we can't talk too much about season 2, I will ask you this: going back to season 1, one of my favorite gifs is the like, I don't even know what movie it's from, but when Antonio Banderas is like at a computer and he just like is like, ooh, that's the one, like just that expression of just like, this is it, this is perfection. As the animation director, what moment from season 1, what scene, or it doesn't have to be any scene that just left you with that, like you just like stepped away from the computer and you just kind of gave yourself the pat on the back, like, yes, like that's that shit, like that's awesome.
There's a few of them that I really dig. I really like the shootout with IG-11 in the first episode.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
I think that came out really great. He's just, because he's like goofy looking, he's got that stiff-legged tin toy robot walk. But then when he starts shooting, he's just shooting every direction. It's amazing. So I love that. I really proud of the Mudhorn sequence. I think he looks really physical and real, and the mud looks real, like everything. I just super happy with that sequence. I really am psyched that we went to the extent of building a miniature of the Razor Crest and shooting it like an old school miniature, motion control style.
Wow.
And it's not every shot. Like we didn't put working landing gear in it. So when you see it landing and taking off, that's CG and stuff. But we did quite a few shots with the miniature. And that was fun. And it wasn't just fun in a sort of like, well, we don't have to do this, but it's fun nostalgia. It actually ended up being a really useful, creative path to go down to get that ship feeling like a real thing. Because for one thing, it doesn't, there aren't other Star Wars spaceships that look like it. Like Padme's ship in the prequels is super chrome.
Yeah.
The Falcon is super matte, kind of tan, matte colored. And the crest is sort of in between. It's kind of like dirty, scratched up, brushed aluminum or something, aircraft aluminum. So it helped us to build a model and actually look at that in real light. And then further to actually shoot it with a motion control rig and have all the limitations of that. And anyway, so that was super fun. I'm trying to think back because I've been through 2 whole seasons now.
I know, maybe
it's all blurred together. I'm trying to think, like, what's let's see, for Sorgan. Sorgan was fun. It from an animation standpoint, it wasn't as big for us because it was more about people. Oh, actually, I take it back. On Sorgan, we had the whole ATST attack in the forest.
Yes,
and that was super fun. Because I love that thing. We got to do a tiny bit of ATST stuff in Rogue One, and I think we all wanted to do more of it, but it just didn't fit in the story and the time of that, the length of that film and stuff to have more of it. But so I was psyched to get to do a whole bunch of it in that episode. So that was great fun. The whole TIE Fighter thing with Moff Gideon and Mando in the final episode was great. Yeah. That was super fun. It was a good season. One thing we started on really early, and then it just lingered through almost the whole season, it felt like, was the fight between IG-11 and the 2 scout troopers on their bikes. It's not even a fight. He just like takes them out. But we started in on that early, and then it would kind of get put aside periodically to kind of tackle other things, and we revisit it. We try some new approaches, but it took a long time to get that right because they wanted, John and Taika both wanted almost, almost cartoonish action, like when he's pile driving the guy's head, boom, 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 against the forks of the bike and stuff. But then we keep wanting to rein it back so it doesn't feel completely animated and hopefully a little real. And it was just a really hard balance to strike. But this guy Ken Steele was my anim soup on that sequence, and he just did a great job on it, and it came out great. So that was fun. That was super fun. Yeah, lots of good. Thanks for asking me that. Lots of good memories. I've been so up to my eyeballs in season 2. I hadn't thought for a while about. Yeah,
and I'm glad.
No, go ahead. It's all right.
No, I'm just saying. I was glad you mentioned that AT ATS, because I felt like that episode when that came out, the show had already been good, but that really elevated it to like, wow, this is a Star Wars show. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
this is Star Wars. Like, and it
Shout
really
out
started
to-
to elevate. Yeah, it's really started to tap into that,
Yeah.
those feelings that we have. But I wanted to ask you real quick. You worked on Rogue One, which is, I think widely considered one of the best Star Wars, movies since the prequels, at least. Some say since the originals. But I wanted to ask you, like, I text Adam all the time. Like, one of my favorite scenes is just the Death Star with the half powerful, like it wasn't as powerful. That explosion on the planet.
Oh my!
It's like that was one of the most beautiful explosions I've ever seen on film. It was just so gorgeous. Did you guys have anything to do with that?
Oh yeah, that was a giant pain in the butt, but it was. But I love it too. I love that whole scene because it's got a great. I don't sound too pretentious, but it's got a great emotional underpinning because Jin is in the middle of seeing this hologram message from her father, who she hasn't seen since she was little, and she thought he was dead, and etc. And she's finally getting the download from her dad in this super emotional way. Meanwhile, Krennic is firing this half-powered blast into the city miles away, which is going to soon engulf. Anyways, so that scene, even in the very earliest stages when it was just storyboards or previs, I remember getting goosebumps and thinking, this is great. I love the whole, how this all comes together. So then executing it was terrifically difficult. We had this guy, Mo and Leo, was our visual effects soup at our London studio. And they did the lion's share of the work of, those biggest shots of the earth being sort of ripped apart and coming at them as a big wave and everything. And just the beauty of it, the way it turns into an eclipse of a thing, and then the beam fires. And I love that sequence. I just adore it. And I like that it's K2 that comes sweeping in with the ship, and he's like, what did you say? There's a problem with the horizon. There is no horizon.
I mean, it's a long way from blowing up Alderaan. It's just come a long way from that. It's like,
and I think I remember watching it thinking, like, we all saw A New Hope. Alderaan got blown up. Boom, it's gone. But to see that, like, from being on the planet and how it looks, it was it was a marvel. It was a complete marvel.
Gareth was really good with taking the time to, and I think in his perfect version of the film, there probably would have been more of this, but he capturing the sort of the sense of like the daily lives of all these people you see in the marketplace. Like he went around shooting lots of great B-roll of like little kids playing against a wall and stuff like that. It didn't make the final cut just because you've got, at some point you've got to make decisions and get things into a certain order. But there is that moment where Jin rescues that little girl from the firefight when the tank's about to explode. And if you stop and think about it, it's like, well, that was all in vain because and it's kind of,
man, that's a great point.
Yeah, it's pretty dark stuff for Star Wars, and it's not. I mean, George had Anakin, going to the nursery, the preschool, and there have been other pretty dark moments. But it was definitely in that vein of like, there are consequences. This stuff, it's not just a visual effect shot. It's like there's a whole human story behind it, which I thought was great. That's one of the things I loved about Garrett's vision for that film. And
it's a I believe the 4-year anniversary was last week. I saw on Twitter, and someone had just posted some shots from the film, and it's such a visually beautiful film. Like, just beautiful.
And I've said this before, if I just try to look at it completely from the outside, if I could have picked, well, here's the thing. So when it was announced that, Lucasfilm is going to be making more Star Wars films, And I'd worked on the prequels, but it had been a long time since any of us had a crack at, Star Wars. So when that was announced, I was telling everybody at ILM that would listen that, I got to be on that, I want to work on that. But it transpired that the director of the first of the sequels was J.J. Abrams, and J.J. had a relationship already with some folks at ILM because of past projects that he'd worked with them on, like the Trek films and stuff. So I knew that left me out of that project because I knew who the people were going to be on it. And that's fine. That's the way things work. But then John Knoll, who I'd worked with on a bunch of films with, and continue to work with him, I'm working on a couple of projects with him now. He pitched this idea for Rogue One. And so, number one, he's like, one of my best friends, and I was excited for him. But also it really tickled me that sort of one of our own had the idea for this film. And so, he's like, well, you got to be on it. I'm like, yeah, of course. And so it was one of those one door opens, another door closes. Because if I'd been locked into Force Awakens, I think it would have overlapped with Rogue One in a way where I couldn't have done it. And so from the outside looking back, I somehow, super dumb luck, ended up on the two Star Wars projects of recent years that I would have most wanted to have worked on, just as an outsider, meaning Rogue One and Mandalorian. And a big part of that obviously is that they're in the timeline of the original trilogy, which is closest to my heart. One of them is immediately before, the other one's 5 years after. But also, there's just the thing of working on John Knoll's project and also working on Jon Favreau's project. Those are also good connections for me and lucky. I feel like those are lucky talismans for me or something. So, yeah, I'm super pleased to have worked on Rogue One. I adore it, and I got to tell you, I always, if I work on a film, it's hard, nowadays with the streaming thing, I have to get this sort of fixed by watching reaction videos, which I really enjoy.
Yeah.
It's so funny because I was going to ask you if you did that.
Yeah. And so with films,
don't get me started.
I would always go on opening weekend. I just try to go out and see it with a regular audience so I could just gauge hear the reaction. And I got to tell you, it was the best on Rogue One opening weekend because you get toward the end and Bodhi gets spoilers. Bodhi gets killed, and then K2 gets killed, and then Baz and what is it?
And just from
again,
just from his perspective from Disney, that was under Disney's, Disney, and I remember watching that, and for the film I thought it was perfect, but also I was like, man, this is Disney doing this,
And I just started looking around the audience. I'm like, oh, they're starting to figure it out, and then, and then. Jen and Cassian are stumbling out on the beach, and I could hear people in the audience going, no, they're not. No, that was super fun. But also it was fun. That sounds sort of sadistic, but it was fun just feeling people reacting to that, but also knowing that the Vader scene was going to come up seconds later.
And which really was just one of the most classic scenes ever.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, like I said, I know you can't talk about season 2, but on that level of, what people will see in the finale, just tapping into that, making grown adults feel like little kids for just a moment, and it's just like getting this that as adults we just go through. You're paying bills, you're living, just living this boring adult life. Just to tap into that kid feeling for just a second.
Oh my God.
It's priceless, man. It's priceless.
I DM'd Hal. I DM'd, he could speak to it. I DM'd him and said, thank you. For all of us for that scene. I get emotional.
No, it feels really good. And part for the Star Wars of it all, but also I'll tell you, just in terms of visual effects, before Jurassic Park came out, if you showed somebody something that they was just, and including Jurassic Park, if you showed them something that they just couldn't understand how it could possibly be, like the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, you'd get this wow reaction, right? This just childlike wonder of what am I even looking at? What changed after that is that people had a little file folder in their brain that was marked, it was done in a computer. So that any film after that they saw where it was just impossible imagery, they could, at the very least, even if they didn't understand how it was made, they could go, well, they do that in a computer.
Exactly.
And so getting that reaction, that just sort of like, whoa reaction is, in some ways it's a good thing, because what's happened, it's harder with visual effects because you can't, just putting a realistic dinosaur on the screen going to do it. So but the good thing, a part of it, is that it puts the pressure back on where it belongs, which is the ideas behind it. And so I got to tell you, being part of, I'll be forever grateful for being part of this season of Mandalorian, because that final episode, I've just, I've seen it over and over again online and in reaction videos and stuff, and people moved by it, moved in the Star Wars of it all, but just generally. And that's down to just the construction of it and the iconography of Star Wars and the execution of it, certainly. But it's great fun to be part of that. It really is. Because like I said, we can't get that jolt from just a competently, executed visual effect anymore.
Exactly.
But we can get it if the ideas are there and the heart is there and all that. And then you really get it. And it's great to be a part of that. It's really good.
I just want to give a little shout out to Peyton Reed for directing the episode. Like, I know, he has a pretty extensive, photography if you're an MCU fan. Ant-Man and the Wasp, which I feel like as MCU movies, they don't really get they're not, thought of as whatever. Like
I know what you mean.
The pantheon of the MCU, but Peyton Mr. Reed said, listen, I got something for anyone who may have, it's just that whole episode, just television perfection. I told Ryan, I texted Ryan after I watched it, any medium, TV, movie, that was the greatest thing I've ever seen. The episode as a whole. And I say that with no hyperbole. I'm not exaggerating.
I dug working with Peyton. I'd never met him before, but we worked with him on both episode 2 and the final episode of this season. And I thoroughly enjoyed working with that guy. And I'm a big fan of the Ant-Man films. In fact, my favorite Marvel films are the funnier films. The Ant-Man films, Guardians of the Galaxy, Thor Ragnarok.
Thor Ragnarok is yes.
Yeah, and I enjoy the other films too, totally. I mean, I'm not down at Ragnarok, but just the ones that I click with the most of the funniest ones. So it was super fun working with him. I really dug it. And the final episode was really hard. A lot of hard work in that stuff, a lot of nail biter stuff that we worried about. I mean, if nothing else, just keeping the secrets that we needed to keep.
Oh my God.
Especially in these last few weeks, that's when I really was like, come on, we could just keep it. And we did it with season 1. We kept Grogu under wraps. And, hats off to Disney, because they could have sold a hell of a lot more
marketing
merchandise. Yeah. If they had, but they held it all back, and good on them. And so we were in, a similar situation this year with the final episode of not wanting to have anyone, get the word out or leak it out. And, it was a nail biter, but I was so happy. I was that, especially midnight Thursday night, because when the episode dropped, I'm just
man,
I'm scrolling Twitter, what's
no, listen. I mean, I was literally I was at my job and I was like, hey, I need to step out for a sec. And I'm sitting in the car watching the episode, 9:00 in the morning, and I'm just so appreciative of that, because look, it's been a tough year. 2020 has kicked our ass.
Oh man.
So just to have a moment of just enjoyment, just remove us from reality for a little minute and just enjoy something in a galaxy far, far away, a long time ago, that has nothing to do with, whatever's going on in America today. Oh man, you can't pay for that. You can't pay for that.
It's good. It's a good thing. And by the way, I wanted to mention, you mentioned working in IT, and then just now you're talking about 2020. Obviously we had to do all the post-production for season 2 from home. We finished 2 weeks, finished shooting about 2 weeks before everything in California went into lockdown. So that was fortunate, and that was just dumb luck. But what I wanted to mention is that at ILM in the past, we've had, some small, number of folks who work from home for one reason or another. They're on maternity or paternity leave or whatever, or some special circumstance. But mostly people go into the facility and they have a desk there and they work. And so we had to send everybody home on the same day, all at once, and then have them all hitting the network remotely, the next day. And I mentioned this just to say, IT folks are heroes. Like, we never could have done it without crew making it happen. And there was, the first week there were a few little bumps and wrinkles because we never had everybody home before. But man, they pulled it together, and we were able to kind of just get on with it. I was so impressed. Anyway, so I'm just saying, hats off to IT professionals. What I'm saying.
There were some long hours taking place.
Oh yeah. No, I'm sure of it. Yeah.
You hit on a question that we brought up. Ryan and I had talked about a couple of weeks ago. I tweeted when all this news regarding the casting confirmations of Spider-Man 3, when that came out, in terms of it potentially being a multiverse, I kind of just quote tweeted something. I said, I miss, and I'm only 33, but I miss days of just not knowing, right? And I told Ryan, I said, imagine going to see Spider-Man 3, and then you realize it's a multiverse, and all these people from prior Spider-Man movies are in it. It would just blow your mind. But with it being 2020, and I'm following Deadline, Variety, it gets spoiled for me, and it gets spoiled for a lot of us. And it's so funny because Ryan and I had this conversation after the rescue, as we knew, the casting news about Ahsoka Tano came out. Boba Fett came out, all that was known prior to season 2. But it feels like there's always been something. So season 1, the pilot, we get the Grogu reveal. Completely had no idea that was coming as fans, right? In season 2, obviously we know what happens in the finale. Can you just speak to what goes into keeping that, especially season 2, keeping that completely wrapped up in today's modern society where everything gets leaked? It's so impressive.
It's really hard because, film is collaborative. There's a ton of people on the crew, and, the vast proportion of them are dedicated and concerned about keeping those secrets and all that. But there's just so many eyes and ears around on a project. As well as a lot of people that are sort of outside of the main orbit. I mean, you've got actors, agents, and people like that who may be well, I know I'm supposed to keep this quiet, but I'm really excited about my actor being involved in this project. So I'm going to find a way to get that word out there. And I don't, that doesn't come from any specific knowledge of me. I'm just spitballing. And then you also have things like, if you decide to go forward with merchandise, you might have some toy company somewhere that has a big trade show in Denmark or something, and their little program for the trade show somehow gets scanned and put online, and everyone's like, "Oh, look, there's character names and all that," and that's just super hard to control. So Disney's been great by if they need to hold back merchandise, they've held it back and that kind of thing. And we went to all kinds of crazy lengths to keep the secret for the final episode of this season. And, down the road at some point, I can talk about that. We can, we should have a part 2 of this once that, we're able to talk more about.
Oh, don't worry, Hal, we will.
But we went to all kinds of crazy, because you have to understand, there's filming, obviously, right? You've got a bunch of people involved with shooting, costumes, props, set deck, everything, right, that goes into that. And you've got post-production, not just visual effects, but the sound. Then there's all the stuff that happens for the platform, like foreign language dubbing, for instance, for all the different markets around the world. And it's how do you keep secret? And somehow it worked. But I got it, like I said, the last few weeks especially, I was like, and even on the day of, there was that thing where somehow or the track names for the next. They released the soundtrack.
Oh, the soundtrack by Ludwig.
Yeah, and the soundtrack names for the next leaked or I don't leaked or just released or whatever, but on the final day, and people were just like trying to figure out what it all meant. Fortunately, those track names are pretty cryptic.
Yes.
For instance, for the previous episode, for the one with Bill Burr, there was a track name that was like Brown Eyes. It's like, well, that doesn't tell you anything. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
What does that mean? If you haven't seen the episode, if you've seen it,
And even that, even the finale, the rescue, that moment's only referred to on the track as a friend. Like that's it. That's all it says.
Yep. So that was like, I heard, because somebody messaged me and said, hey, there's some leaks. And I'm like, oh shit. And I looked and I'm like, oh, okay. It's all right. That's not too bad. So yeah, but in our next installment, we'll I can get a little more detail about all the subterfuge that was required to make that happen. But yeah, it's pretty, the other thing about it for me was just, I'd never met Mark Hamill before, and to finally get a chance to meet the guy in the context of shooting a scene that was related to that character that was like extra special and kind of blew my mind.
all of us.
Just legit adult tears that Friday, just streaming from my face, and it was emotional. It was happy tears. But then what takes place, at the very end, it's like it's sad tears because that
Pedro Pascal.
Oh, his acting! Like, can we give some love for Pedro's acting of having such little screen time with his mask off, but what he's able to do and act with just voice inflection and it was a marvel, just an absolute marvel.
Yeah, and he's such a nice guy. I don't know. I don't think I've even properly met him on Saturday, but I follow him on Twitter and everything. And he's just, what a great guy. What a nice, he just seems like a great human being. So that's all awesome.
Ryan, did you have anything else for Hal?
No, we've abused him enough. It's.
Hey, you guys were supposed to hit me with a football question.
Okay, yeah, you're right. Sorry, it was like fuck football. We're talking Star Wars and this. Care about football right now, Hal. So obviously we are a hashtag Saints Twitter podcast, so we do talk about the New Orleans Saints extensively. So do you have a favorite football team? Do you follow it? Anything like that?
I don't follow a team religiously. If I had to pick one, it'd be the Niners, only because I've lived, most of my life now in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I know so many people who actually grew up here who are just so, like, they just identify with the Niners, like, as that's, in a cultural way, like beyond just a sports team, just like as a San Francisco thing, even though
it's an institution. Yeah.
So, if I was forced to pick a team that like I'm connected to, I would say it's the Niners, but again, only in a sort of cultural San Franciscan sense, not so much as a hardcore sports fan or anything like that.
Okay, that's fine. That's all we had. We're gonna talk about X's and O's. Talk about favorite players. That's fine. That's it. We'll take it. Hal, it's been an absolute pleasure. I will say, don't tease our listeners and say that there's going to be a part 2, and then you said there's a part 2 that's going to happen, and we're gonna do a part 2. I did see you tweet today the logo for the Book of Boba Fett, which is set to drop on Disney Plus next December, next year, December. So I'm just asking, I don't know if you're able to talk about it, but I assume because you tweeted it, does that mean that you're going to be working on that as well? I don't want to jump to a conclusion.
That I can't say yet.
Okay.
I mean, we'll see.
Right.
We'll see.
All right. Okay.
I respect that. I respect it.
No worries. And I'll leave it to you guys to, like, a part 2 of our conversation. I'll leave it to you guys to, promote that or describe that or reveal that at your when you're ready.
We will, well, with the holidays ramping up, once the holidays has cooled off, we will definitely touch base again in regards to getting part 2, when we can talk about a little more in regards to season 2, kind of more in depth. Yeah, it's been a pleasure, Hal. Like I truly mean that. And thank you so much for just coming on and just talk. It was great. Like it went like an hour plus, and I feel like we could have talked for more. It was just great. So, so you can follow Hal on Twitter and on Instagram. Although his account is locked on Instagram, so he might not accept you, but for sure follow Hal on Twitter at Hal Hickel. And also, I wanted to say, which I applaud you for, is you use your platform in terms of speaking out politically about a lot of the political shit that is completely wrong. And I love it. Like Hal will be tweeting, he'll retweet, and I'm like, talk your shit, Hal, like get him. So I love it. I do. Love to see people that have any type of quote unquote position in regards to whether it be entertainment or whatever, just any type of industry where they have a voice and using it. I love that. So I just wanted to give you props for that as well.
I appreciate it.
Much appreciated.
So with that, we're going to get out of here. We officially concluded our first Star Wars episode. So it's not going to be our only Star Wars episode. And we're just going to get out of here. And again, thanks so much for Hal for coming on. With that, we're out.
Peace.
Enjoy all your favorite sports like never before at BetMGM. Sign up using code Hawkeye and receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. When you register with BetMGM, you'll get instant access to a variety of parlay selection features, live betting options, and the best daily promotions in the business. And with BetMGM at your fingertips, every play and every game matters more than ever. Remember to use code Hawkeye and receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. Place your money line, prop, or parlay bets with the king of sportsbooks today. BetMGM and GameSense remind you to play responsibly. BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. Iowa only. New customer offer. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. Please gamble responsibly. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-BETS-OFF.
This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.